I think it's very difficult to forecast ahead, but I think it's critical that you do it. The problem is with schools, they make decisions based on short-term information. And for example, I've been to many meetings where they've been discussing taking on an additional teacher. And they've had a look at the budget and said, yes, we can afford it, so we can take them on. And I'm saying, just hold on a minute, what about next year and the year after and the year after and the year after? Instead of looking at 7/12 of the salary in the current budget, shouldn't we be looking at full salary next year, inflation the year after the year? And that's what we should be making our decision on, not the short term, can we afford it right now? Very interesting, I started long-term financial planning probably 20 odd years ago. And it's still not fully introduced into every school now, but I decided to introduce some software, and I created some software to write long-term planning, and that's important as well. But interestingly enough, when I started to present around the country to head teachers about long-term strategy and vision and long-term financial planning, and the most interesting one was in Stratford-upon-Avon, 20 years ago. I talked about long-term planning, and half the audience thought I was a complete idiot, and half the audience thought I was obviously knew what I was talking about, and it was quite interesting. So I saw the reaction when I talked about 5-year planning. I saw the audience, and half of them were falling around the place in the aisles and just thought it was hilarious. Somebody could even talk about long-term planning, and so I asked the one head teacher, what do you see as a long-term plan? And I'll never forget his response, which was, well, if I could get through to the end of the week, that'd be pretty good. So that sort of told the story really about, you know, what schools were thinking. I'm thinking how difficult it was for long-term planning. But when you start to look at it, there's actually a lot more information available than you think. So we can make assumptions, and obviously there's a lot of assumptions go into a long-term plan. The quality of them assumptions determines whether the long-term plan is good or not. But so there are a lot of things you can do. So funding, for example, you can put in funding levels, you can increase them, you can decrease them, you can leave them constant, you can have various scenarios. You can look at your pupil numbers. You usually got a pretty good idea what your pupil numbers are likely to be, short, medium and longer term. You can look at your staffing structures to ensure that those are right to meet the requirements of your school development plan, and I'll talk about that quite a bit through the session. So that's important, the school development plan and the vision driving conference. So there are a lot of things you know that you can build into a plan. There are other things you have to guess at. There are things that you know historically the costs are. But nevertheless, when you start to build up a picture, it's amazing actually how much information you do have, which gives you the ability to do longer term financial plan. And obviously if you've got software to do it as well, that's a huge advantage.